Ladies and gents, thank you very much for coming. Just to give you a bit of background, so I attempt to write about watches every so often, fairly poorly, and I try and take photos of watches as well. And I've done this for a couple of years, and one of the guys that I met along my journey has been Kristian, and he's, I'll let him explain exactly what he does, but he's become a good friend of mine, and he's a passionate collector of watches. And this evening we will discuss collecting, but we'll also discuss how technology has evolved and integrated collecting into the psyche of the modern collector. So, Kristian, thank you for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
You've got an unbelievable collection of watches, but it's unclear exactly what you do. So what do you do, and how do you do it?
In terms of profession, or how I collect watches?
Both.
Well, I used to work in advertising. I was actually trained here in London many moons ago, and but I've also always had a passion for watches. And in 2005, I sold my agency, and I dedicated my time to only write about watches. I already had one book under my sleeve, and nobody really wrote about watches back then, and I dedicated my full professional life to only concentrate on watches. So, of course, it was from a passion of horology, and today I work for an auction house in Copenhagen. I'm in charge of the watch department. I've written 6 books on watches. I do speaks on watches, and I recently started an app called 8+10. We are working on the Android version, but as of now it's only for the iPhones. It's also a website, and it's a community for watch lovers. So everything I do is like, it's just that horology, geeky passion that comes out of my veins.
But why watches? When was what was the tipping point? It could have been anything, but why watches?
Well, I have a company called Time Geeks, and the payoff is because stamps are for nerds. And of course, it's a weird thing to say, but thankfully, watches it's become sexy again. It used to be just a tool showing the time, your grandfather's clock or something like that. But all of a sudden, this whole old-fashioned thing has become so hot, so sexy, with crazy auction results and boutiques in New Bond Street like this. I mean, this is 4 stories up, right? Of old-fashioned mechanical items that nobody really has any use of, except for being seduced of mechanical micro mechanics. Wonderful, fascinating, extremely expensive interest, I'd like to add, in terms of that. It's hard to explain why I'm so passionate about watches, but let's try.
Was there one watch when you think back that was the one that got you inspired? One that you look back and maybe the first, that you think that was a tipping point?
Well, definitely Rolex. I think for everybody in this room also, Rolex is like the first thing that we meet. We see them in magazines, we see them at tennis tournaments. It's like that brand that really comes out. And as a kid, I realized really fast that a Rolex was, a signal of success. You wear a Rolex, you made it. That's like that thing. And then, of course, it evolves. It's like when you buy your first car. You buy a first car. Well, at least I did. I bought a 1962 Volkswagen Beetle, beautiful with old license plates on it. And as soon as I bought it, I started reading car magazines, and I realized, if I'd spend another $2,000, I could have all 4 wheels or something like that. And you kind of get into it. Once you realize that this is the start, I don't think there's any end to it.
So when you started getting into it, did you think that, was there a strategy behind the collecting? Did you have a long-term vision for it, or was it just a lust, a passion?
Well, the strategy was actually to go from fake watches to real watches. When I was a kid, I liked to go out, and it cost a lot of money to drink in Denmark. It's really, booze is not cheap. And I started selling fake Rolex watches to my friends in school, and Lacoste polos. I would buy the polos, I would sew on the sewing machine, have my mom sewing machine, put the little crocodiles on it. And definitely my biggest wish was to one day to buy my first Rolex. But that I couldn't afford it until I started working in advertising.
Did you make more money from the fake Rolexes or the jumpers? Which was more profitable?
That's a good question. I think, I had this bartender in a disco, and he would always buy 50 Polos, to sell them again with a profit, and he would probably only buy one fake Rolex. So probably the jobs, yeah. That's it. Maybe I should get back to that.
And so, IWC plays a big role in your collecting. I mean, guys, if you happen to use social media, if you use Instagram and various other media, you'll see Kristian's profile, and IWC plays a key role. Why is that? What is it about IWC that you're so passionate about?
They paid me. No, that's stupid. That's not true at all. No, that's again buying the first car.
Yeah.
I was into Rolex, and once you go through your Rolexes, you realize there are other brands. And after collecting Rolexes, I started to get into Panerais and IWCs. But IWC has a... Hey, Robin.
Kristian, hi.
Good to see you, man. IWC was always there, very masculine. I remember one of the very first IWCs I saw was the double chrono. It's split seconds, date. One of the best bracelets ever made. Very expensive, but the design of the watch and the functions, I think, are perfect. So I couldn't afford it, so I started with the cheaper models, quartz and stuff like that.
And social media, when you initially engaged with social media, was there a strategy? Did you have a plan for how you were going to connect with people and connect with like-minded watch geeks?
No, it was actually some Swedish friends of mine. They weren't on Facebook. I thought it was weird, and they said, "Oh, find us on Instagram." That's how it started back in 2011. Back then, you didn't have that many watch-related Instagram accounts. But the cool thing about it is, I always liked photography. But with the iPhone, I stopped doing photography, and instead I shot pictures. With Instagram, I started to get into photography again, which is weird because it's like a 4x4, and I started to spend more time doing photography, and I actually ended up doing less writing and more Instagramming. I really got into it, and which explains my latest book, Hashtags and Watches. It's actually my my Instagram account in print, because I'm also a print romantic. So I wanted to make everything work together.
So was it a vehicle for telling a story with less, having to actually write less and was it an instant connection with an audience that?
Well, that's the original concept behind Instagram, to get that instant feedback. That's a good question, actually. I still write a lot. I still do books. I still write articles and do speaks. But Instagram is it's a terrible drug. You really get addicted to it, and you really spend a lot of time doing beautiful photography. So you want your feedback.
Yeah.
You really want to. Any more people like it or something like that. It's childish. It's stupid.
What have been the highs and lows of your social media experience so far? Can you look back?
The high is definitely my book. To come out with something as foolish as Instagram in print. I mean, that's almost an oxymoron. But it's been a great success, and I've only sold it via social media. So the whole concept behind a silly idea just became a really good high, I have to say. It's almost sold out. A new one will come, and I hope it's going to be as much fun and not as stress. Making number 2 it's always hard.
What would your advice be to brands? Because this is something that a lot of brands are tentatively entering.
Yeah.
What does the audience actually want? Because there's always this talk of instant gratification. Is it engagement? Is it audience size? What actually is it that a brand should consider?
Well, I think, since we are actually, this is a church of micromechanics, it's very traditional products we have here. So I think it's been tough for especially the Swiss, to embrace new media.
There's multiple different channels that brands can consider. How do you see social media evolving? How have you seen social media evolving? And what is to come?
If I knew what was to come. I'd buy this place. And I'd buy you all to be my friends. I mean, that would be amazing if you could see what's to come. I think Facebook, of course, we know them. They are the leaders of everything. It's almost a little dangerous in terms of the algorithm of what news we should see and stuff like that. Instagram is owned by Facebook, so we're seeing pretty much the same happening there. But we still have to see it as a serious playground. Also because the influencing, we tend to really dive into the media and want everything in there. And I think that Instagram, for instance, is dream weaving, whereas Facebook is call to action. You can actually press a link and go straight there and go e-commerce. So I think this little fella here with Instagram, is it waterproof? It's the iPhone 7. Is an outrageously important tool. And I think in the next year or two, I think we will see another 10 or 15% of luxury being purchased from an iPhone or an Android. So every company, they have to take a stand. How are we doing this? What are we going to do about it? And more watch brands are doing that, because we have to admit that these are not watches, these are lifestyle products with a great Swiss tradition, a great craftsmanship, and wonderful straps from Santona, as you see here. So we get lured into that whole seduction thing, and this is why you're sitting here. You're having champagne. Maybe you're going to have too much champagne that you think that 25,000 UK pounds for a watch is nothing. It feels great. Hangers won't. But we still have to admit that whole seduction, we need that. I mean, this is a house of romance. And I think the most important thing is that even men admit to the romance. This is why we buy vintage cars. This is why we buy vintage Fender Stratocasters and watches like that. Because when we were kids, we couldn't afford all these wonderful things, but we dreamed about it. That was the whole dream weaving. And now the kids are living at home. At least I threw my kids out. I paid my debts and stuff like that. I can afford to have my dreams come true. Which is why I like to buy watches, because I've dreamed about them since I saw them in National Geographic when I was a kid. The first pages would be these wonderful watch products and cameras, and that's everything I own today. That's all the dreams. And even though that men have a hard time admitting to romance, this is what auction is all about. Sitting up there for that watch that you dreamt about, but that other guy is also from that same year, he wants it as well. And everything we have here are the contemporaries that will be tomorrow's collectibles. And I think the watches especially represents that. Which I think is also the reason to why the Swiss-made watches, especially the mechanical watches, will still be hot and sexy for decades to come. Even though we have smartphones and all that, but then again, go home, ask your kids, do you want my old iPhone? Well, do you want my big Pilot from 2002? Oh yeah, I'll do that. So you cannot have that obsolete. That's not seduction. That doesn't matter. It's technology. But a wonderful mechanical watch with a great history, that will stick. That's romance.
Is it romance just for men at IWC?
No, that's a good question, because for many years it used to be der Uhr. Very masculine. It was engineered by men, for men, etc., etc. And IWC was all about big balls and big watches. But actually in the last 3 years, IWC have started more DU as well. Not too many years ago, the boutiques would be all about big airplanes, fighter pilots, Formula One cars. But if you look at it, I mean, I could live here. It's very nice coloring, great walls and nice chairs. It's all good. And also, if you, in the showcase actually, right in front of me here, you see a big pilot, and next to it, just a 36mm pilot's watch for women.
Yeah.
It's very new. It's a 2016 collection, so it's not only about male watches. And I think we're going to see, well, I know we're going to see a lot more female timepieces from IWC.
What was your girlfriend's response when she received the news that she was getting one from you?
Well, actually, why I asked for this couple's watches to be in the showcase, because that's what I bought for myself and my girlfriend, actually. The blue dial Big Pilot and the blue dial 36 millimeters. Wonderful. IWC couples. One of the first watches she ever saw on my wrist was an IWC, my Big Pilot. She always loved that clean design, the ruggedness, and when I presented her with this watch, she was flabbergasted. She never wore a watch before, but this was amazing.
One of the things that a lot of collectors turn around to me and say is that they tend to get into trouble with their other halves because of their passion. Because they come home and tell them they've just bought something new. Was your girlfriend into watches before, or did you get her into watches? How does that work? Do you have to convince her that it's okay?
We just bought a new house. There was absolutely no economical room for watch purchase, but then again, your home will probably last as long as your watch is, or the other way around. So it's a good way to celebrate as well. And back in the 70s, you know, most of the brands would have couples watches. The larger one, the smaller one, and stuff like that. But now women, they buy their own watches, so it's not like that. In this particular example, it's actually a smaller version of a gentleman's watch, but it's also a way to introduce the female audience to this wonderful world of IWC mechanical watches. A little really wise trick for you guys, you collectors. In my living room, I have a glass winder with 3 perfect watches, perfect fake watches, very obvious. It's the first thing you see when you come into the living room. Let them have that, and they will take it. They will think, oh wow, we got 3 wonderful, whatever, tourbillons, and they'll leave. It's a good old trick for collectors to just have those obvious fakes sitting right there when they come in.
Some of your old
But don't tell anyone, okay? Like the crooks here.
We do it for years.
Thank you, ladies and gents.
Thank you, Kristian, on behalf of IWC. It's been fantastic. It's been fun. Let's have a look at some of the watches and